back to this week's interview on Around the Bases with Bubba and Mo with the busy MLB Hot Stove Winter Meetings action. We are pleased to be joined by Craig Mish. You can find him on Twitter at Craig Mish. He's all over Sirius XM radio doing fantasy sports and whatnot. Craig, how we doing?
Oh, I'm just fine. Thanks for having me. It's been a wild little run here for me, but you're catching me right at the end of my 15 minutes. I think I'm like at 14:30 of my 15 minutes of fame. So we're gonna wrap it up this week and then get back to fantasy sports, which is what I like to do best.
Yeah, that's where I got to know you, was in the fantasy realm, and I'm in a league with Ray Flowers and stuff, so I know you know all those guys. And man, you are on top of this Miami Marlins beat. So let's just keep it simple out the gate here. What has this 14 and a half minutes been like for you?
Yeah, it's been pretty wild. I didn't think that it would get this crazy. I mean, I kind of had a feeling that I'd be on top of the Stanton stuff because I've been following it for 4 months. Let's see, July, August, September, October. Yeah, about 5 months. And look, in South Florida, we don't have a ton of media covering the Marlins, and I didn't think it would be that tough for me to jump into the mix here because I had some pretty good sources, and I've always kind of treated baseball fairly here, so people are willing to talk to me, and I think that's the key with sources. I don't burn anyone. I always treat things favorable the right way, and with the relationships that I've built, I took a run at it, and I came, and it was kind of interesting because at the winter meetings, most people were saying, because I was bummed out that I didn't break it, that I didn't have the final say on that. But everyone's like, no, the process, man. Like, you had the 4 teams that he was going to. You had the Giants meet. I'm like, yeah, but I didn't break it. And then, lo and behold, today I was able to shut the door on the Ozuna trade. So that kind of made up for the other one. But it was incredible because my life has been possessed by this for a couple of weeks. Late night chatting, late night breaking news and stories, and the attention that I've gotten, for sure, everyone's aware of that on social media because I've been playing back and forth with everyone, and it's been a really cool experience. It's not something that I think that I want to do with my life full time because it is consuming and stressful. But when it comes to doing stuff in my own market in South Florida, or when I get information from around the country, I'm happy to suggest it. But I'll leave the everyday business to those guys who do it every day and do it a phenomenal job of it.
Yeah, it looks like a heck of a grind, but it looks like it's been a fun one for you. And like you said, you had that Stanton beat for quite some time. So what was the process like there? For the longest time, it's the Giants and the Cardinals, and then all out of nowhere, they weren't even on his list, at least to the spectators like myself. And then he narrows it down, and next thing you know, the Yankees have a done deal. How'd that all unfold in your realm?
I can only go by my opinion, but I can tell you what I think happened. I think that the Giants and Cardinals were serious about acquiring him, but I don't think that Stanton was ever serious about signing with them. But the problem is he gave the Marlins a list of teams, and when they called those 4 teams, the Astros, the Cubs, the Dodgers, and the Yankees, I think they only got lukewarm interest from the Yankees, Astros, and Dodgers. They didn't get any for the Cubs. The Cubs were just like, no, forget it. So the Astros, it was a quick conversation. They talked about money and prospects. It didn't go anywhere. The Yankees, they felt like could be involved, but I'm not clear on that from the beginning how that went. But I think what the Marlins kind of assumed is, hey, we're in some trouble here. If the Yankees really are posing the best deal to us and we have no one else, we better force somebody to get involved here, or else we're going to have to take whatever the Yankees offer us. So they made Stanton go visit with St. Louis and San Francisco. I'm going to guess that they took that deal back to the Yankees and said, hey, here's what you got to beat. The Yankees probably said, all right, let's think about it. And then 24 hours later, boom, it came out that both teams were out, St. Louis and San Francisco. The Marlins then ran back to New York and said, all right, whatever it is, let's do it. And I think that's kind of the way it went down.
Yeah. What are the thoughts? We'll start with that deal. What are the thoughts on the return from Stanton? Obviously, all the, armchair judges of all this think it wasn't much, but from a Miami viewpoint, what are their thoughts on that?
Oh, I think the thoughts in general is that they didn't get a ton back in return in all of the trades, and I can kind of speak to that, but Guzman is the main name that they got from the Yankees, and you notice that they've acquired now at least 3 pitchers that are going to fall into their top 10 in their prospects. So that was really the goal. And that's really been what the Marlins have failed so miserably on outside of the since departed Jose Fernandez. They have not hit on any young pitchers whatsoever. I mean, brutal. And the closest they ever came to hitting on a pitcher was the kid Luis Castillo, who they traded to Cincinnati for Andrew Cashner. Or I'm sorry, for Straley, for Dan Straley. I'm even confused with the trade. Oh, yeah. I get even confused with the trades that they made. I think that was the trade, right? It was Straley.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah, so, I mean, that kid would have been their number 1 starter next year. So, scouting, high school pitchers that they've drafted have gone down with Tommy John surgery 2 of the last 3 years. They've done a horrific job of that. And I think what they're doing is they're stockpiling these arms. I think they realize that not all of them are going to hit, so they're doing it in bulk. But the key for the Marlins, no matter what anybody says or what anybody does, what they're going to try and accomplish in the next 2 or 3 years, yes, these names that they've gotten may not be the best. They may not be the top prospects. They are going to focus in on the draft. This is everything for them in the next 2 to 3 years. I'm not saying forget the names they got in these trades. I'm not saying that at all. All I'm saying is when you have the first pick in the draft, you have pick number 1 in the first round, 1 in the second round, 1 in the third, and on and on. And they're going to do that for 2-3 years, just like Houston and Chicago. Will they hit? I don't know. But that is their plan. The draft is going to be crucial for them to get back in this thing in a few years.
No, and that's a good point. That's a point I've made a few times is these might not be the flashiest names, but let's wait till everyone's dealt and look at the grand total, like the sum of the parts, and then see where they can go with this. Because it might be, like, we talked the Dee Gordon deal. They got Nick Neidhart back, a good young arm. He's young, though. Long ways to go. You got Alcantara and the Ozuna deal today. There's a lot to look for, and some people are saying they're not the best of the best, but they're still so young. There's time for development there. So we have a lot to learn on this one. On the Dee Gordon side of things, that one surprised some of us on the fact that they didn't even ask Gordon if he wanted to play center field. And I don't know how well you know Dee Gordon, if you know him at all. What are your thoughts on Dee Gordon playing center field for the Mariners?
Yeah, that was bizarre. In fact, I knew about that trade before it happened. And you sometimes when a source tells you something, you can't always put it out there. You got to go with what they tell you. So, basically I was told, hey, he's going to go get traded to Seattle. But if you put this out there, you could screw up the deal with Stanton. So do me a favor, let's let that Stanton deal get done. As soon as it's done, that's fair game. Go ahead and mention it. So I did a Periscope and chats, and I was saying, hey, this is going to happen soon. But unfortunately, you got to honor what your source tells you to do. You can't go off the grid. And yeah, I didn't get that story, but it was so crazy when I heard Seattle, because the first thing you do when somebody tells you something is you just accept it as fact. And so I accepted it, didn't think much about it. Then the next morning I woke up and I'm like, wait a minute here. Okay, well, I get it. They're gonna put him at second and they're gonna put Cano at first. Okay, I don't know what they'll do with Healy, maybe DH or move Cruz and right, or they'll figure it out. But Gordon will be at second, Cano will be at first. That's what I thought. And then when I heard the center field thing, I thought, wow, like how's that gonna work out? So naturally, what I did is I called my friend Cliff Floyd, and we were just chatting about it and talking about it, and we were kind of running through how that could possibly happen. And I kind of share his opinion on it, is that this is not something that Dee Gordon can't do, but the timing of it seems very awkward because spring training, they're going to report in about a month or 2 from now. And had Seattle had any kind of interest, you would think that someone would at least slip a little note under his door saying, hey, you may want to work out at center field. He only has 2 months to get this ready in a big park in Seattle. I mean, Jerry Dipoto's a very smart man. Has made some incredible trades, but I don't know what their fallback is. I can only think that if it doesn't work out, they move him to second and Cano to first, because anytime there's a sacrifice fly to center field and there's a runner on third, that guy's going to be safe. I mean, every time. So
yeah, that's the part. That's the part I don't get is, yeah, sure, he can cover the ground, he can catch the fly balls. I'm not worried about that. It's that arm in center field could be a liability, but hey, you never know. Maybe he gets the footwork down. It made me wonder why they didn't go after a guy like Billy Hamilton, who has the total package out there, but maybe the deals and the prospects, and that's how it all fleshes out. Plus, he probably wanted that $1 million in bonus money, thinking he's getting Ohtani. So there's a lot to be said about that.
I agree, yeah.
The Ozuna deal, you broke it today. It happened. Alcantara coming your way and a couple other arms, plus Sierra in the outfield. This seems like, I thought, a pretty good return. And like I said, with all these deals, they're getting bashed.
Yeah, they're getting bashed. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Is this does this seem like to me? It seems like a better deal than the Stanton deal. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, well, Alcantara is, 100-mile-an-hour arm that is a little bit wild, but he's very young, and they could easily keep him in the minor leagues this year and develop him more at AAA. I know he struggled, and then he pitched well in the Arizona Fall League, but those guys don't just grow on trees. So I would think that if they get a good developer for him, he could project to be a 2 or a 3 or maybe even a 1. He's not there yet by any means, but I thought he was okay. And the other interesting part of this is that when the Cardinals came to South Florida this past year, and I was at that game, I was at a couple of them. I was with Jim Bowden, and the manager of the Cardinals, Mike Matheny, was in love with Sierra. I mean, I'm shocked that they traded him. Now, look, he's never going to hit 30 home runs in a season. We know that. Funky swing, plate discipline will be in question. But if he can develop into a 40, 50 steal guy, I think that he was the fastest guy maybe in baseball or close to it. And an on base of what, 315, 320, bat 280, make contact like Juan Pierre, like Luis Castillo. Again, potentially starter this year, starter next year. You know what? Maybe a stopgap guy, but a guy that gets them through games, wins some games, and we'll see what happens. But the other pitcher they got, I thought was okay. Zach, yeah, I've heard a little bit about him and looked him up a little bit. The reality is that it's 2 years of Ozuna. I think they did okay. I'll call it how it is. At this point, again, it's the sum of the parts at this point with the Marlins. They're trying to stockpile as much as they can. They know they're not going to hit on everyone, but I am certain that the draft is the single most important thing to them. They have to hit on it coming up soon.
Okay, let's talk about some other names because it seems like almost anybody's up for grab, and one that you've had some very coy tweets about today, Christian Yelich, 5 years of control, I believe, still young, every year getting better and better. Any team would want this kid. Like, he's very, very good. What are you hearing about Yelich?
I mean, I heard Yelich was really upset even before all this started. And he didn't want them to trade Stanton or Ozuna or anything else. He has no choice. He also had no trade clause. And Christian Yelich is also going to be set for life with the contract that he has. Look, players instinctively want to win, and I get it, and I understand that. But I got the sense from people that I've talked to that he was upset, and I'm guessing that when they speak to him, he's going to ask to be traded. And I understand what the reports are, and respectfully for all the guys who have covered the story, I respect their opinion and I respect their perspective. But you know what? I've been right a lot in here, and I'm going to say that I think that they're going to try to trade him too, and that will allow them to potentially move another arm that they have off the books, like Brad Ziegler or Junichi Tozawa, or maybe even Wei Yin Chen. And the one point that I do want to make about the Marlins at this point is everyone thinks that what they're doing is they're going to just strip this down to zero and stop. What people don't understand is in 2018, who is going to pitch for this team? Who?
Exactly.
They have to go out and sign these 1-year mercenaries, Tillman, R.A. Dickey. Like, they're going to have a few guys making $4 or $5 million, and then they're going to try to flip them at the deadline. We know that. But they have to have some pitchers. They have none. They have zero. So even if they take this payroll down to $80 million, it's going to go back up to 90 because they're going to have a couple of guys. They don't have any. They have Jose Urena, and he could be a starter for them, and they really don't have anyone 100% reliable beyond that. So I still think that's to come, and I think that if Yelich is traded, and I think there's a possibility of that, people will freak out again. It's just something that's going to have to be done.
Yeah, they will freak out, but the return for what they could get there could be tremendous. So that could be good to see. One last guy, and then a couple more questions here, and we'll wrap it up. You've mentioned today Dan Straley could be on the move, and you already mentioned earlier he was in that Luis Castillo deal. That one, I guess nothing surprises me right now, but that one did surprise me a bit. Anything you can tell us on that?
Yeah, well, that's just a player that when you look at it, you have to ask yourself this question: does Dan Straley hold more value to him being on the Marlins right now, or him being on another team at his salary, and can they potentially get things back in return for him? The risk that the Marlins will run, and let's just for the sake of argument understand that the Marlins will not be competitive for a minimum of 2 years. Minimum. Probably longer, but let's just be conservative and say minimum. By that time, Dan Straley will be a free agent anyway, and he'll be gone. So you may as well, if you're going to approach this with Ozuna, send Straley to a competitive team where he can slide in as their number 3 or number 4 starter. He shouldn't be the Marlins ace. And what happens in May if something happens? He's had some history of being injured. If he gets hurt, that's it. You lose all the value in him. So he's another one that I was told before this all started. I was told Stanton first, Gordon second, Ozuna third, and Straley fourth. So we'll see if that ends up playing itself out. Yelich was not in that conversation then. If so, he would be the fifth. But by the time the season starts, I think we obviously know what this team is going to look like.
Well, so far you've been dead on with that order. One last question here for you. So Derek Jeter and the buying group are taking a lot of flack with this, but everyone knew what was going to have to take place. Like I said, with the Stanton deal, when he signed that deal, there was going to be a point where they couldn't afford him anyways. It was just the way that it was structured. How are like I don't know how to say, the level-headed fans or the fans with, half a train of thought actually accepting Jeter and company and how they're taking this over?
Well, nobody is really in South Florida, and they just see it as another fire sale. Some things haven't been handled correctly. Even Don Mattingly said today on MLB Network that if Jeter had to do it all over, my guess is he would handle things a different way. But the same decisions would, in all likelihood, be made. It's just the tact of some of them, and some of them, the optics aren't so good. Being at the Monday night game when you're not at the winter meetings. Look, I get all that, and that's true. The reality is that the situation started, unfortunately, when Jose Fernandez passed away. And when that happened, the organization had two choices. The first was, which is what any franchise would do, is say, you know what? I think it would be acceptable for us to kind of take a mulligan here, take a step back, regroup a little bit, build some young kids, and then we'll fire away in 2 or 3 years. Well, the owner, Jeffrey Loria, and the president, David Sampson, well, they knew they were getting out. So essentially what they did is they decided to go for it for 1 more year, but instead of signing all these guys to 1-year deals, they signed them to 2-year deals. And so that's why they're stuck with all of these players, and it's not Derek Jeter's fault. The finances of the payroll, he knew going in. There were other things internally that you can never be 100% sure of when you buy a business, and he found out the hard way in that situation. The key is going to be for Jeter and Sherman and this ownership group, it's not going to be now. I'm not worried about who owns the team now and how much money they spend because it's irrelevant. No one is going to be spending money this year or even next year. In 3-4 years from now, as long as they're solid in terms of the team and in terms of their finances, that's when the real question will be. Not now when their payroll is so low, but what happens when they need to go get Justin Verlander or they need to go get a top-type starter or closer to compete. 3 years, 4 years, that's when this will be determined. Jeter's been in office now for 3 or 4 months. I cannot say that the guy's done a horrible job. Maybe he handles some things poorly, but we have to see some results before we determine that.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Jeter's, as we know from on the field actions, he wants to win. He's not going to take on this venture just to make money, in my opinion. But if the tragedy of Jose Fernandez didn't happen, do you feel this takes a whole different path?
100%. Here's what happens if Jose Fernandez doesn't pass away. The Marlins don't chase Kenley Jansen for $80-90 million. They don't fail. They don't give Martin Prado a ridiculous contract extension that they can't move. They don't have Tazawa on their team. They don't have Edinson Volquez on their team, who they just cut today. He's making $13 million this year to not pitch. They don't have Brad Ziegler. I mean, they just tried to put a Band-Aid on this thing, and it destroyed this season. Now, would Stanton still have been moved? That's still a possibility. But at the same time, imagine the team with Jose Fernandez and this fantastic offense without having some of that horrendous payroll. Maybe the Marlins would have gone all in this year and tried it and gone for it. But it was a moot point. And again, no one could ever blame the Marlins for what happened with Jose Fernandez. And Jeffrey Loria, the owner, and they wanted to win. He wanted to go in 1 more time. It was a very poor decision. All tapped that year when they traded, as I mentioned, Castillo. And, for Cashner, it didn't work. And wow, if the Marlins had that kid to go along with some of these others, it could be different. If it's not.
Yep. Well, Craig, I appreciate your time. You've been a busy guy, but the work you're doing is amazing. Everybody appreciates it. You can find Craig on Sirius XM doing a lot of fantasy sports talk there, and on Twitter at Craig Mish. Craig, thanks for joining us, and we'll have to talk again some other time.
Thanks really for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks.